What if I told you that a single eyewitness account from over 1,000 years ago could unravel the darkest sexual rituals in Viking history? That what you're about to hear is so disturbing, so graphic, that many historians tried to bury it as myth or propaganda. Stay until the end, because the final scene, a funeral unlike any other, will chill you to your core. In the year 922 AD, a Muslim diplomat named Ahmad ibn Fadlan journeyed deep into the frozen lands of the north. He had expected harsh climates and foreign tongues. What he didn't expect was to witness a spectacle so intimate, violent, and sacrilegious. It would haunt him for the rest of his life. He stood among Viking raiders as they prepared to burn their chieftain's corpse. But this was no ordinary funeral. Before the flames were lit, a slave girl was ritually violated by warriors from the triband. Then, offered as a living sacrifice, she was set ablaze alongside her dead master. Ibn Fadlan recorded it all in chilling detail, not as a myth, not as a metaphor, but as fact. These accounts, along with sagas and archaeological discoveries, unveil a terrifying truth. Vikings used sexuality as warfare, as spectacle, as spiritual currency. From public consummations and sexual executions to human sacrifice disguised as holy rituals, sex wasn't just private in Viking society. It was weaponized. In Viking culture, your sexual behavior wasn't just gossip, it was law. The terms ag and rhaegar described men seen as passive or effeminate during intercourse. But these weren't just slurs, they were death sentences. Under Viking law, calling a man passive could legally justify his murder. No jail time, no trial, just blood and silence. Power wasn't shared, it was penetrated. The active partner, the one who dominated, was seen as strong and honorable. The passive one, he was stripped of land, rights, weapons, even the right to speak in court. In the Viking psyche, being sexually submissive meant you weren't a man at all. These weren't isolated insults, they were catalysts for war. Entire blood feuds erupted over rumors of softness in bed. The saga of Burnt Ungellel recounts a family massacre sparked by a single man calling another unmanly. In Egil's saga, warriors crossed countries just to slaughter someone who hinted at their sexual weakness. Women, too, played the game. They knew that questioning a man's prowess was as powerful as any sword. In the Laxdilla saga, a woman divorced her husband for being too gentle in bed. His honor crumbled. His status vanished. His life ruined. The constant need for dominance created an endless cycle. Men fought to prove their manhood, which caused more violence, which demanded more dominance. Masculinity became a deathmatch, relentless, bloody, and personal. Vikings didn't just use swords to conquer, they used shame. There's a word in the sagas, klumhog, the shame stroke. When Vikings defeated an enemy, they sometimes slashed his buttocks not to wound, but to symbolically simulate anal penetration. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was ritual humiliation, turning warriors into victims and victims into warnings. But they didn't always stop at symbolism. Captured leaders were raped publicly to obliterate their status. The saga of the Volsungs tells of kings, once mighty, reduced to broken bodies and haunted minds. The logic was horrifyingly clear. If you force someone into submission, you don't just break their body, you steal their soul. Their masculinity doesn't vanish, it transfers to the victor. Some victims, dishonored beyond redemption, took their own lives. Others were shunned, wandering without home or name. Their pain became a symbol of Viking supremacy. Now imagine this system, scaled up for profit. Vikings turned human trafficking into an industry. At markets in Dublin and York, they traded people like cattle. The youngest and most attractive captives were claimed by chiefs for personal use. In the Jomsvikinga saga, Earl Sigurd kept a harem of Irish women, rotating them like objects. The legal system drew brutal lines. Free women had rights. Enslaved women had none. Raping a free woman, death penalty. Raping a slave, a fine, more than you'd pay for breaking a tool. In medieval Iceland, The law literally priced sexual assault. A slave woman's body was worth less than a cow. Archaeology supports it. Graves in Dublin revealed that up to 30% of the population were slaves, many seized specifically for sexual purposes. The message was clear: resist, and you might not die, you'd suffer something worse. Stories of Viking cruelty spread like wildfire, causing whole villages to surrender without a fight. Their reputation became their sharpest weapon. Even love was transation. In Viking weddings, privacy wasn't just rare, it was legally suspect. The bride's family was required to witness the couple's first sexual act. No witness, no marriage, no dowry, no deal. Sometimes relatives literally stood in the room. The saga of Grettir the Strong recounts a bride's uncle supervising the entire act, yes, Uncle Mike, with a front row seat. The marriage bed was blessed like an altar. Bloodied sheets were shown off the next day as legal proof of virginity, and failure to perform had consequences. If the groom was too timid, the bride's family could sue. Even the rituals were loaded with raw symbolism. Thor's hammer was placed on the bride's lap. Guests passed it around as a fertility blessing, subtle as a sledgehammer. But the most terrifying ritual, the Viking funeral, where sex and death collided in one of the most disturbing ceremonies in human history. What happened when a slave girl became a living vessel to carry a dead chief's spirit to the afterlife? Keep watching. The end is far darker than you imagine. When a Viking chieftain died, the tribe didn't simply mourn. They prepared for a transformation, a ritual soaked in wine, flesh, and fire. At its heart was a single slave girl, chosen to follow her master into the next world. She wasn't forced, she volunteered. To the Vikings, that made it sacred. In the final days before the funeral, she became a vessel. Warriors from the tribe visited her, one by one, offering not lust but legacy. They whispered, "Tell your master, I did this out of love," as if she were a message in human form. Each act was believed to charge her with spiritual energy, building a bridge between the living and the dead. But this was no gentle farewell. As the hours passed, the rituals escalated. She was given intoxicating drinks and herbal sedatives, and her body was passed between more and more men. The encounters were not acts of passion, they were sacrifices, each one offering a piece of the tribe's life force to their fallen leader. On the day of the funeral, she was led to the ship draped in furs, drugged into serenity, unaware or resigned. Inside the ceremonial pavilion, 6 men, each representing a different force of the tribe's strength, wisdom, fertility, vengeance, wealth, and death, lay with her one final time. Then, silence. The angel of death entered. An old woman, known and feared, wrapped a thick cord around the girl's neck, while another plunged a blade into her side. The two actions happened together, strangulation and stabbing, merging pain and passage in one final act. The girl collapsed beside her master, their bodies arranged in death as if lovers in sleep. The pyre was lit. Flames consumed flesh, wood, and meaning. The tribe chanted prayers, not of mourning, but of triumph. The ritual wasn't just about burial, it was about transfer, power, legacy. The tribe believed their essence, funneled through her, was now bound to the chieftain in the afterlife. Centuries later, archaeologists would find the truth in ash and bone. At Oseberg, they unearthed a ship containing 2 women. One showed signs of violent death. In other sites, high-status men were buried with young women, their bodies bearing the unmistakable signs of ritual execution. Ibn Fadlan hadn't lied. He had seen it all. What confuses modern minds is the paradox at the heart of Viking culture. Free women in Viking society had rights unheard of in medieval Europe. They could divorce their husbands for being unmanly or unsatisfying in bed. They could own land, inherit wealth, and even propose marriage. Some women, like Odd, the deep-minded, controlled estates and organized trade networks across the sea. But that freedom was built on the backs of the enslaved. A Viking woman could legally destroy her husband's reputation with a few words, but a slave woman had no voice. She could be used sexually, beaten, killed, no consequences. The same law that punished an unwanted kiss toward a free woman placed no value on a slave's suffering. The contrast was deliberate. It reminded every free person what they stood to lose. Freedom wasn't just about power, it was about distance. From the abyss. And Viking women weren't bystanders, they enforced this world. Archaeology at Birka revealed graves of female warriors. Sagas spoke of women who urged their husbands to commit acts of violence, including sexual humiliation of their enemies. Their own rights were preserved through the suffering of others. But not every girl made it to adulthood. Female infants, unwanted or inconvenient, were sometimes abandoned at birth, left in the wild to die of cold or beasts. The sagas mentioned it in passing, as if it were as ordinary as rain. In the end, Viking society created a ladder where only a few could climb and the rest were used as rungs. Their approach to same-sex relations followed the same cruel logic. Vikings accepted sexual encounters so long as one played the active role. A man could sleep with another man and still be honored, provided he penetrated. But if he was suspected of being passive, even once, he could be ridiculed, assaulted, or even killed. Some of their gods faced this ambiguity. Loki, the trickster, transformed into a mare and birthed a foal. Odin practiced seer, a type of sorcery associated with women. For that, he was mocked even by his fellow gods. There was no law banning homosexuality, but accusing someone of being rage-passive was treated with lethal seriousness. The insult alone could justify murder. The obsession with dominance infected every layer of Viking life, even justice. Punishment was never private. If someone committed a sexual crime, their punishment was often designed to mirror their offense, publicly, painfully. A rapist might be raped before execution. An adulterer might be castrated in front of a cheering crowd. These weren't just punishments. They were performances. Some Viking festivals included sexual torture of prisoners as entertainment. Crowds gathered to bet how long a victim would survive. The saga of the Jomsvikings tells of prisoners forced into degrading acts until death or madness took them. Archaeological sites reveal mutilated corpses, evidence of systematic, staged cruelty. But to the Vikings, it wasn't cruelty. It was order. Sex, pain, dominance, and law weren't separate. They were fused, like the steel of a blade folded again and again in fire. This was no accident. This was design. They built a society where power flowed through the body, through who could touch, take, wound, or refuse. They weren't savages without rules. They had many. Complex, brutal, and exact. And those rules shaped more than their world. They shaped ours. The Viking legacy didn't burn with their ships. It spread through conquest, through culture, through bloodlines. You see it today in how we define masculinity, in how we shame weakness, in how sexuality and power still collide. They didn't just raid villages, they rewrote identity, and they did it all with a sword in one hand and sex in the other. You've just witnessed one of the most disturbing realities ever documented in human history. A world where sex was law, violence was virtue, and dominance was divine. If you made it this far, thank you. Let me know in the comments what civilization you want me to explore next. And remember, some parts of history were buried for a reason. Subscribe. The next story might be darker still.